She literally laughed right in my face and asked how I could ever think a girl like her would actually date a guy like me. Right on cue, her little clique started giggling. I just kept my cool, forced a smile, and told her that was great, because it meant she'd never have to lay eyes on me again. But later that night, a message popped up from her best friend that completely stopped me in my tracks. To give you some context, I'm a 30-year-old guy working in IT consulting. I pull in a decent living, stay in pretty good shape, and usually, I'm the type of guy who just minds his own business and keeps his head down. I wouldn't say I'm the loudest person in the room, but I'm definitely not a ghost either. Up until all this went down, I thought I had a pretty clear picture of what I wanted out of life. A stable relationship with someone genuine, and down the road, maybe a family of my own. I really thought I'd found all of that with Emma. By that point, we'd been together for 8 months. We actually met through some mutual friends at a rooftop barbecue last summer. She was 27, worked in marketing, and she had this incredible, infectious laugh that could instantly brighten up the whole room. She was beautiful, no doubt about it, but it was more than just her looks. She came across as genuinely kind and down to earth. We clicked almost instantly. Before I knew it, we were staying up late talking for hours, taking weekend trips, and hanging out with each other's friend groups. I even introduced her to my folks after we'd been dating for about 4 months. My mom absolutely adored her, and my dad told me she brought really good energy to the table. I was falling for this girl, and I was falling hard. Looking back, though, there were red flags I completely brushed under the rug. Just little things, you know? Like how she was constantly glued to her phone whenever we hung out, only to laugh it off and claim it was just work drama or her friends being extra. Or how she'd cancel our plans at the absolute last minute, even though she always had a completely logical excuse lined up. Her attitude would flip on a dime, too. One day she'd be incredibly warm and affectionate, and the next she'd feel totally distant and checked out. But I kept making excuses for her, telling myself that every couple goes through a few bumps in the road and that I was probably just overthinking things. Then, 3 weeks ago, the rug got pulled out from under me. It was a Friday night, and we had planned to meet up at this trendy downtown wine bar that her friends were always raving about. I showed up right around 8 o'clock, wearing a nice button-down shirt that she'd once told me made my eyes pop. As I walked in, I spotted her tucked away at a corner table with 4 of her friends. Jess, Alicia, Maya, and some other girl I didn't recognize. They were already deep into the laughs, their glasses were looking pretty empty, and they had that classic pre-tipsy buzz going on where literally everything seems hilarious. I walked right up to the table with a smile on my face. I said, "Hey guys, sorry I'm running a bit behind. The traffic out there was an absolute nightmare." Emma looked up at me, and just for a split second, her face went totally blank. No warmth, no welcome, just completely empty. Then she glanced over at her crew, and just got this smug smirk on her face and said, "Oh look, he actually showed up." I just chuckled, genuinely thinking it was all some lighthearted joke, and said, "Of course I showed up. Why wouldn't I?" Emma took a slow, long sip of her wine, set the glass back down on the table, looked me dead in the eye and said, "Honestly, I don't even know why you keep trying so hard." The entire table went dead silent, and then Maya let out this nervous little giggle. I stood there confused and asked her what she even meant by that. Emma just leaned back in her chair, crossed her arms and said, "I mean, look at you and then look at us." She waved her hand around the table. "Did you honestly think someone like me would ever seriously date a guy like you?" Right then, her friends started snickering. It wasn't even a loud, obvious burst of laughter, just these petty little giggles, like they were all in on some private joke at my expense. Alicia covered her mouth, and Jess just stared down at her drink with a massive grin. I stood there frozen for what felt like an eternity. My chest felt incredibly tight, and I could feel my face getting hot, but I didn't yell or throw a tantrum. I didn't give them a scene. Instead, I just smiled. It wasn't a fake smile either. It was that specific kind of smile you give when the pieces finally click and you realize something you should have seen coming from a mile away. I just said, "Good. Then this is the absolute last time you'll ever have to deal with me." I turned right around and walked out of that bar. I didn't look back once, and I didn't wait around to see how they reacted. I think I heard Emma call out my name behind me, But I didn't care. I got straight into my car, drove back to my place, and just sat on my couch in total darkness for 2 solid hours, running the entire scene over and over again in my head. The tears didn't come right away because I was just too numb and completely bewildered. 8 months of my life. I had met her entire family. I physically helped her pack up and move apartments. I sat and listened to her vent for hours about her job, her deepest insecurities, and her past relationships. And after all of that, this is how it ends? In front of an audience, like I was just some punchline she'd been saving up to deliver? What would you do in this situation? Leave a comment with your thoughts. Right around midnight, my phone buzzed on the counter. It was a text from a number I didn't have saved. It read, "Hey, this is Alicia, Emma's friend from tonight. I really need to talk to you. I am so incredibly sorry about what went down earlier. You didn't deserve to be treated like that." I just stared at the screen. Alicia, Emma's actual friend, the one who was sitting right there at the table. My first instinct was to delete it and block the number entirely, but something about the message felt surprisingly sincere. I typed back, "Why are you even texting me?" The 3 dots popped up immediately, and then she replied, "Because what she did was messed up, and there is a lot more you actually should know. I'm not trying to hurt you more, but you deserve the real story. Can we please talk tomorrow?" My hands literally froze over the keyboard. To be honest, I didn't sleep a single wink that night. I just kept staring at Alicia's text, reading those words over and over again. Part of me wanted to just ignore the whole thing, block every single person connected to Emma, and never look back. But I couldn't shake it. That phrase, "There's more you should know," just kept echoing in my brain. Finally, around 2 in the morning, I gave in and replied, "Fine. There's a coffee shop on 5th and Main. Meet me there tomorrow at noon." She hit me back instantly, saying, "I'll be there. Thank you." The next morning felt completely surreal, like I was living in a movie. I went through my usual routine totally on autopilot, took a shower, made coffee, and just stared blankly at my phone, wondering what kind of mess I was walking into. By 11:30, I couldn't wait around anymore, so I drove over to the coffee shop and got there way too early. I ordered a black coffee that I didn't even taste, and sat right by the window, watching people walk past and wondering what the hell I was doing there. Right at noon on the dot, Alicia walked through the door. She looked completely different than she did the night before. No makeup at all, her hair was tied back in a basic ponytail, and she was just wearing regular jeans and a sweater. Honestly, she looked exhausted. She ordered some tea at the counter and came over to sit across from me. She looked down and said quietly, "Thanks for actually showing up to meet me." I didn't say a word back. I just sat there and waited for her to speak. She took a deep breath and said, "Look, I know you probably want absolutely nothing to do with any of us ever again, and I don't blame you at all. What happened last night was horrible, and I've been losing sleep over it all night." I looked at her, my voice coming out way flatter and colder than I expected, and asked, "Why did she even do it?" Alicia shook her head and said, "I don't completely know. I mean, I have my theories, but I don't have a real answer. Emma has been my friend for 5 years now, and sometimes I feel like I don't understand her at all." So I pressed her on it. "What did you mean when you texted me that there was more I should know?" Alicia stared down into her teacup. "Emma has been going through some stuff lately. I don't know every single detail because she keeps a lot of it locked away, but I know she's been seeing a therapist. Apparently, it's about deep commitment issues and these patterns of self-sabotage. Jess actually brought it up a few weeks back." I felt this massive knot tighten up in my stomach. I asked her, "So what? This whole thing was just some kind of twisted test?" Alicia replied, "No, I don't think so. I honestly think she just got terrified. Things were getting really serious between you two. You met her parents. She actually admitted to me once that whenever a relationship starts feeling real, she finds a way to completely blow it up before the other person can hurt her." Alicia looked up and locked eyes with me. "Look, that doesn't excuse a single thing she did. Absolutely nothing makes that okay. But I just thought you should know that it wasn't actually about you. It was never about you." I just looked at her and said, "Well, it felt pretty damn personal." She nodded and said, "I know. And I am so sorry. I should have opened my mouth last night. I should have stood up for you, but instead, I just sat there like a total coward. We just sat there in total silence for a minute. Finally, I asked her, "Why are you even telling me all of this?" She looked at me and said, "Because you honestly seem like a genuinely good guy. And I just watched Emma destroy something really good just because she's too terrified to let herself be happy. I've watched her do this exact same thing before, but it has never been this cruel." I suddenly realized that by staying quiet, laughing along, and pretending it's just Emma being Emma, I've just been enabling her behavior. Alicia reached into her pocket, pulled out her phone, hesitated for a second, and then slid it right back away. She sighed and said, "I was actually going to show you some text messages, but I realized that's really not my place to do. That would just bring more unnecessary drama and more pain. But what I will tell you is this. Emma texted our group chat right after you walked out last night. She didn't apologize to anyone, and she didn't feel bad at all. She literally told us that she finally found the courage to end things, and that she felt completely free." Hearing that, my chest just tightened right back up. Right after that, I completely dropped out of the group chat. Alicia went on to explain. "And first thing this morning, I looked Emma in the eye and told her flat out that I can't be around someone who treats another human being like that. She lost her mind, called me a total traitor, and now Jess and Maya are completely furious with me too. But honestly, I don't give a damn anymore. I just couldn't sit by without you knowing that not every single person at that table thought what she did was acceptable." I sat there just looking at this girl. I barely even knew her, yet here she was, putting her own long-term friendships on the line just to make sure I knew the real story. Right then, I felt this weird shift inside me. It didn't exactly make the pain vanish, but it made me feel a whole lot less isolated in the world. I looked at her and said, "Thank you. Seriously, thanks for tracking me down and being straight with me." She just gave me a sad smile and said, "I'm just so incredibly sorry it happened to you in the first place." We ended up hanging out for another 20 minutes or so, and she really opened up about Emma's whole track record. It turns out this wasn't her first rodeo. She'd pulled similar stunts on past boyfriends, just never in such a public, brutal way. She told me how Jess and Maya always cheered on her worst behavior instead of keeping her in check. Alicia admitted she'd only stayed in that circle out of pure habit and shared history, but deep down, she'd realized she didn't even like the kind of people her friends had turned into. When we finally stood up to leave, Alicia made sure I had her number. She told me, "Look, if you ever just need to vent, or if some question is keeping you up at night, just hit me up. I know I'm probably the last face you want to see right now, but the offer is always open." I thanked her one more time, got back in my truck, and drove home. That night, I did something I hadn't done in a couple of years. I picked up the phone and dialed my older brother, David. Now, David lives about a 3-hour drive from me with his wife and their 2 kids. We've always been tight, but we aren't exactly the type of guys who sit around and talk about our deep emotions. Usually, our conversations revolve around sports, our jobs, or exchanging terrible dad jokes. So when I called him up out of the blue on a Saturday night and said, "Hey man, I really need some advice," I could instantly hear the shock in his voice. He immediately asked, "Whoa, what's going on?" So I laid it all out for him. I told him about the whole 8-month relationship, the nightmare at the wine bar, the humiliation in front of everyone, and everything Alicia had dropped on me at the coffee shop. Honestly, I fully expected him to get completely pissed off on my behalf. Maybe call Emma a piece of garbage and tell me to just forget she ever existed. Instead, the line went totally quiet for a good, long moment. Then he quietly asked, "Man, how are you holding up right now?" I sighed and told him the truth. "I don't even know. I'm just totally confused, hurt, angry, and honestly, incredibly embarrassed." David nodded on the other end and said, "Every single bit of that makes total sense, brother. You got completely blindsided out of nowhere, and that is just brutal. I am so incredibly sorry you're going through this." I told him, "I just keep playing the scene over and over in my head, you know? Trying to pinpoint where I screwed up or what signs I completely blew past." David stopped me right there and said firmly, "Listen to me, You didn't do a single thing wrong. Just because someone treats you like garbage doesn't mean you are garbage. It doesn't say a thing about your worth as a man. It says everything about who they are. I groaned and said, yeah, but everyone saw it happen. Her friends, the strangers at the bar. I just stood there looking like a complete idiot. You didn't look like an idiot at all, David shot back. You turned around and walked out of there with your head held high and your dignity intact. Let me tell you, it takes a lot of real strength to do that. He paused for a second, then cleared his throat. Look, I've never actually told you this before, but something pretty damn similar happened to me back in college. This girl I had been seeing for nearly a year ended things with me right in the middle of a massive party in front of a whole crowd. She told me I was boring, and then dropped the bomb that she'd been messing around with someone else the entire time. I was stunned. Are you serious? Oh, completely, David said. I was absolutely destroyed. I spent weeks completely miserable, wondering what the hell was wrong with me. I stopped going out, my grades completely went down the toilet, and I was a mess. Finally, one of my roommates sat me down, looked me in the eye and said, "Man, you're letting her win twice. She already broke your heart once, and now you're letting her memory break your life." That really hit me. David continued, "Look, I'm not telling you to just snap out of it and get over it by tomorrow. You need some real time to process all this heavy garbage. But do not let this one girl define who you are. Do not let her drag away any more of your life than she already has." We ended up staying on the phone for nearly an hour. He walked me through how he finally managed to climb out of that dark hole, how he ended up meeting his wife a couple of years later, and how that miserable college breakup actually taught him exactly what he needed in a real partner. By the time I finally hung up, I felt this massive weight lift off my chest. I wasn't completely cured, obviously, but I could finally breathe a little easier. The next few days were pretty rough, though. I ended up calling out of work on Monday, stayed buried under the covers way longer than I should have, ordered a bunch of greasy takeout, and just numbed my brain with mindless TV. I finally just let myself feel all that heavy, ugly sadness I'd been trying so hard to lock away. By Tuesday, I forced myself to get out of the house and hit the gym. By Wednesday, I dragged myself back into the office. Obviously, my coworkers could tell I wasn't operating at 100%. My manager, Karen, actually pulled me to the side right after one of our team meetings. She looked at me concerned and asked, "Hey, are you doing all right? You seem pretty checked out today." I tried to brush it off and said, "Just dealing with some personal stuff, but I'm fine." She studied my face for a second and asked, "A breakup?" I just gave her a quiet nod. She told me, "Look, take whatever time you need to clear your head, and if you ever just need an ear, my door is always wide open." Lord knows I've been through my fair share of terrible heartbreaks. They completely suck, but I promise you, you do get through to the other side. Just having someone acknowledge it in such a simple human way helped a lot more than I would have thought. By Thursday, I was back to being a functioning human being. I wasn't feeling amazing, but I was getting things done. I got back into my routine of hitting the gym every single morning before heading into the office, started prepping my meals again, and finally called up my folks to let them know that Emma and I were completely done. My mom immediately started fishing for all the dramatic details, but I kept the whole story pretty vague. My dad, in classic dad fashion, just grunted and said, "Well, it's her loss," and immediately shifted the conversation over to football. Honestly, I absolutely loved him for doing that. Then, on Friday afternoon, my phone lit up with a text from Alicia. She asked, "Hey, just wanted to see how you're holding up." I typed back, "Doing better, just taking it one single day at a time." She replied, "That's really good to hear. I'm honestly proud of you." It felt a little strange hearing that from someone who was essentially a stranger a few days ago, but for some reason, her words really meant something to me. Then she added one last line, "By the way, I actually started seeing a therapist myself this week. I'm starting to realize I've got some of my own baggage to unpack." Alicia's text went on. "I figured if I'm going to start calling out other people for their toxic behavior, I probably need to take a hard look at my own patterns, too." I quickly typed back, "Honestly, that's awesome. Takes a lot of real guts to admit that. And seriously, Give yourself some credit for what you're doing right now. You're choosing to move forward instead of just marinating in anger. But as I sat there looking at my phone, I had to ask myself, was I actually moving forward? I wasn't entirely sure, but I was damn well trying. About 2 weeks after that absolute train wreck at the wine bar, the universe decided to throw me a massive curveball. It was a typical Sunday afternoon, and I was standing in the middle of the grocery store aisle, staring blankly at different brands of pasta, when I heard a familiar voice right behind me. Jake! I turned around, and there was Emma. She was holding a shopping basket and honestly looked a whole lot smaller and more fragile than I remembered. She wasn't wearing a lick of makeup. Her hair was just tossed back, and you could tell she'd been crying recently. My absolute first instinct was to just abandon my cart and walk right out of the store. My second instinct was to open my mouth and say something incredibly petty and cruel. But I didn't do either. I just looked at her and said, completely flatly, Emma. She looked at me pleadingly and said, can we please just talk? Just for a single minute. Every single fiber of my being was screaming at me to tell her to get lost. But pure curiosity ended up winning the battle. Fine, I said. You've got 1 minute. We stepped out of the way to the side of the aisle. She set her basket down on the floor and tightly wrapped her arms around herself. She looked down and said quietly, I am so incredibly sorry. I know what I did to you was completely unforgivable. I don't expect you to ever forgive me for it, but I just really needed to look you in the eye and say the words. I didn't say a thing. I just stood there and waited. I've been going to therapy, she continued, her voice shaking a bit. I'm trying to finally figure out why I constantly do things like this. My therapist told me I have this deep-rooted pattern of pushing people away the second they start getting too close to me. Apparently, it's a whole fear of abandonment thing that goes back to my parents' divorce when I was a kid. Look, I know that doesn't excuse a single thing I did to you. Nothing ever could. But I just desperately wanted you to know that it wasn't actually about you. You were an amazing boyfriend. You were literally everything I should have wanted in a partner. I looked at her and said, but you didn't want it. I did want it, she said, and her eyes completely filled up with tears. That's exactly what terrified me so bad. When you took me to meet your folks, I completely panicked. It suddenly felt way too real and way too permanent. And instead of acting like an adult and talking to you about how scared I was, I decided to sabotage the entire thing in the absolute worst way possible. I studied her face for a long moment. She actually looked completely genuine, broken even. To be honest, if we had been having this exact conversation a month ago, it probably would have completely destroyed me all over again. But standing there in the grocery store, I realized I just felt incredibly tired. I appreciate the apology, I told her. But it doesn't change a single thing. I know, she whispered. You completely humiliated me in front of your friends, I said. You made me feel absolutely worthless. And according to Alicia, you didn't even have the decency to feel bad about it after I walked out. Emma flinched when I brought up Alicia. I did feel terrible. I didn't know how to admit that to anyone. So I just put on an act and pretended I didn't care. I'm really, really good at pretending. Yeah, I said. I can definitely tell. We just stood there in this incredibly heavy, awkward silence. Finally, she looked up and asked, Are you seeing anyone else? I looked her dead in the eye and said, That is officially none of your business anymore. She swallowed hard. Right? Yeah, sorry. She wiped at her eyes. I just really want you to know that you never deserved what I put you through. You were a good man, Jake. I truly hope you find someone who actually appreciates that about you. And I truly hope you figure out whatever it is you need to figure out, I replied. And the crazy thing is, I actually meant it. It wasn't because I wanted her back or because I still had feelings for her. It was just because holding on to that toxic anger was starting to feel completely exhausting. Emma gave me a quiet nod, picked up her grocery basket, and walked away down the aisle. I stood there for a few seconds, just processing the fact that that conversation had actually just happened. Then, I grabbed my pasta and kept right on shopping. That night, I picked up the phone and called David again to give him the update. She actually apologized. I told him. How are you feeling about it? He asked. I don't know, I admitted. It honestly felt genuine, but it also just felt way too late. It probably is too late, David said. But at least she had the balls to acknowledge what she did. A lot of people out there live their whole lives and never do that. I paused for a second and asked him, do you think people like that can actually change? Maybe, David said. But it takes a mountain of real work and a genuine commitment to fix yourself. But listen to me, Jake. That is not your responsibility anymore. Your only responsibility right now is to yourself. And man, he was absolutely right. A month went by and then another one flew past. Slowly but surely, life actually started to feel normal again. I ended up getting a promotion at work, nothing earth-shattering, just moving up to a senior consultant role, but it came with a nice bump in pay and a lot more freedom. I also started showing up to a weekly pickup basketball game at the local community center, which was great. I ended up making some solid new friends out of it. One of the guys, Marcus, worked in construction and had this incredibly straightforward, no-nonsense personality that I desperately needed to be around. There were no mind games, no hidden agendas, just honest, regular guy talk. I also made sure to keep in touch with Alicia. We'd meet up for a cup of coffee every couple of weeks just to catch up. She'd give me updates on how her therapy sessions were going, and I'd fill her in on my work projects and how bad I was playing at basketball. It was just really nice having a solid friendship that was completely free of any drama. One evening toward the end of spring, almost 3 months after the whole wine bar disaster, Alicia and I met up at a new coffee shop downtown. I could tell right away she was bursting to tell me something. So, I actually joined a local hiking group, she announced with a huge smile. I've met some really awesome people through it. Honestly, it has been incredible just getting completely out of my old social circle and hanging out with people who don't know a single thing about the old me. That's awesome, Alicia. Seriously, I'm happy for you, I said. And I've actually been thinking, she continued, leaning in. The group is organizing this massive hike up in the mountains next month. It's a full weekend trip, we're talking camping, bonfires, the whole 9 yards. You should absolutely come with us. I winced a little. I don't know, man. Camping? Oh, come on, she insisted. When was the absolute last time you did something completely outside of your comfort zone? Plus, to be completely honest, there's this girl in the group that I really think you'd hit it off with. I raised an eyebrow at her. Wait a minute. Are you trying to set me up right now? She laughed. Maybe a little bit. Her name is Rachel. She's a graphic designer. She's completely obsessed with sci-fi movies. And she has a fantastic sense of humor. Look, there is zero pressure whatsoever. Just come along for the beautiful hike. If you two click, awesome. If you don't, you still get a really fun weekend in the woods. I sat there and actually gave it some thought. The old version of me, the guy from a few months ago, would have shut that down instantly. I would have told her I wasn't ready and crawled back into my shell. But something had fundamentally shifted inside me over the last few months. I had spent so much time focusing on healing, processing the pain, and rebuilding my life. Maybe it was finally time to stop hiding and actually start living again. All right, I said. Count me in. I'll go. Alicia completely beamed. You definitely won't regret it. And man, that hike was absolutely incredible. There were about 12 people in the group, all completely different ages and backgrounds, and every single one of them was genuinely kind. And as for Rachel, Alicia was dead on the money. We hit it off almost instantly. She was incredibly sharp, hilarious, and had this fantastic, down-to-earth, self-deprecating humor that instantly made me feel comfortable around her. We ended up sitting by the campfire talking until 2 in the morning, covering everything from our absolute favorite flicks to our absolute worst dating horror stories. I ended up telling her the story about Emma. I didn't drag her through every single messy detail, just gave her the general rundown of how it ended. Rachel just sat there listening to me without an ounce of judgment. Honestly, it sounds like you handled a horrible situation with a ton of grace, she said quietly. Walking away with your dignity and actually doing the heavy lifting to heal yourself? That takes a massive amount of emotional maturity. I shrugged and said, well, I didn't exactly have a whole lot of choices. You always have a choice, Rachel countered. looking right at me. You easily could have let that experience make you bitter and completely closed yourself off to the world. But instead, here you are, sitting on top of a mountain, taking a real gamble on meeting new people. That's pretty brave. Honestly, I had never once looked at it that way. We ended up swapping numbers before we headed home that weekend. We started texting back and forth, met up for dinner a week later, then went out for another dinner, and then caught a movie. I was incredibly careful not to rush into anything too fast, and I made sure I wasn't projecting my past relationship trauma onto this brand new connection. Rachel was incredibly patient and understanding through the whole process. She'd been through her own massive heartbreak in the past, so she knew exactly what it felt like to have to rebuild trust from scratch. It has now been almost a full year since that miserable night at the wine bar. A year since Emma spat those words at me that, at the time, felt like they were going to define the rest of my life forever. But they don't define me anymore. Not even close. I'm still with Rachel, and things are incredible. We took our sweet time building a foundation, but we are rock solid. She actually met my parents just last month. My mom absolutely adored her, and my dad looked at me and told me she had really good energy. It was the exact same phrase he used for Emma, which honestly made me a little nervous for a split second. But Rachel is absolutely nothing like Emma. Rachel is consistent. She is genuinely kind. And above all, she actually communicates. Whenever she's feeling anxious or unsure about something, she hooks me into the loop and talks to me about it like a partner, instead of trying to blow the whole relationship up. I actually ran into Emma one more time, about 2 months ago. I was sitting in a local coffee shop with Rachel when Emma walked through the door with some guy I didn't recognize. We ended up locking eyes across the room. She just gave me a tiny, sort of melancholic smile, and I gave her a polite nod back. That was the whole interaction. No dramatic scene, no confrontation. Just two people who used to be a massive part of each other's lives, now moving in completely opposite directions. Alicia is doing fantastic, too. She's actually in a really great relationship now with a guy she met through that same hiking group. We still meet up for coffee every now and then, though not quite as often since both of our lives have gotten so busy. She told me recently that making the choice to walk away from her old toxic friend group was hands down the best decision she ever made for herself. You can see it on her. She just looks lighter and a whole lot happier. I still think about that night at the wine bar from time to time. I remember the burning humiliation, the intense pain, and that awful feeling that I was never going to recover from it. But the truth is, I did recover. And it wasn't because I went out and got dirty revenge, or because I managed to make Emma feel as miserable as she made me feel. I recovered because I actively chose to, because I put in the actual work to heal, because I made a conscious effort to surround myself with a circle of people who genuinely cared about my well-being. My brother David was 100% right. Emma hurt me once, but I refused to let her memory hurt me twice by staying trapped in that dark place. I'm not going to sit here and pretend the whole journey was easy. There were some incredibly dark days in there. Days where I flat out refused to get out of bed, and days where I questioned my entire worth as a human being. But those days eventually passed. And when I finally made it to the other side, I realized I had built a life with real intention. A life filled with people who actually value who I am. Someone asked me just the other day if I had finally forgiven Emma for what she did. To be completely honest, I don't even know if forgiveness is the right word for it. What I do know is that I've completely let go of the anger. I've finally accepted the fact that the way she treated me said infinitely more about the broken place she was at in her own life than it ever did about my value as a man. I truly hope she's doing better these days, and I hope her therapy sessions gave her some peace. But whether she fixed herself or not isn't my problem anymore. My focus is entirely on my own life now, on Rachel, on my career, on the deep, solid friendships I've built, on being the kind of man I can look at in the mirror and be proud of. That nightmare at the wine bar taught me a massive life lesson. The way someone treats you when you are at your absolute lowest tells you literally everything you will ever need to know about their character. Emma showed me exactly who she was that night. And more importantly, I showed myself that I could survive the blow, learn from the wreckage, and build a completely better life because of it. That's not revenge. That is real growth. Looking back on some of the questions people have asked me about this whole ride, a few things come up a lot. For instance, people always ask if I ever truly uncovered why Emma decided to act so maliciously at the wine bar specifically on that exact night. Honestly, I'll probably never have a perfect answer for that. My absolute best guess, knowing what I know from Alicia and from Emma's own mouth, is that she simply panicked over how serious and real our relationship was becoming, and she consciously decided to hit the nuclear launch button. Some people have the decency to break up with you quietly behind closed doors. She chose absolute chaos and a public execution. That is a reflection on her character, not mine. A lot of people have also mentioned that Alicia sounds like an incredible human being for reaching out to me the way she did. And man, she really is. Let's be real, very few people in this world have the moral compass to risk losing their long-term friendships just to do the right thing for a guy who was essentially a stranger. I am incredibly grateful she made that choice. Our friendship has honestly been one of the most unexpected, beautiful silver linings to come out of this entire mess. And finally, for anyone out there who might be enduring something similar right now, please, give yourself some grace and some time. Do not try to rush your healing process. Reach out and talk to the people you trust. Seriously consider talking to a therapist if you need some extra help sorting through the noise. Put all of your energy into rebuilding your own self-worth. And above all else, never forget that the terrible way someone else chooses to treat you is never, ever a reflection of your actual value. You are going to make it through this, and you are going to be completely okay. I promise you.